Hey, welcome to the channel. In this video, I'm going to share with you one of my vintage instruments, why I bought it, the condition that it was in when it came to me, which was not good at all, the stages of restoration, and notable players who played this instrument. We're going to take a look at my 1956 Gretsch Firebird. Okay, before we get into it, if you dug that first tune I was playing up top here, that's a tune called Tango and Cash. It's from my first record called Peach Crate. I'll put a link to that down below in case you want to listen to that record. And if you want to support the channel, just go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Okay, this is a 1956 Gretsch Firebird. This was built a few blocks away from my apartment in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Model number is 6131. It's part of the Duo Jet family. Basically, Duo Jets, Roundups, Silver Jets, Firebirds, they all have the same specs. They're all the same guitars, just different finishes. Gretsch introduced the Duo Jet in 1953. This was Gretsch's response to the Gibson Gold Top. It was called Duo because it had two pickups. It was called Jet because Jets were fairly new at the time, and we used to think that stuff was pretty cool. It has two pickups. Early on, it has two single-coil dynasonic pickups, and by about 58, these got switched out for the humbucking Filtertrons. All right, so Duo Jets have a chambered mahogany body. They have a mahogany neck, maple top, rosewood fretboard, 22 frets. Scale length is a little over 24.5. Nut width is 1 1/16, 12-inch radius. Big C neck profile back here. Mine has block inlays, and all Duo Jets had block inlays until about 57, and then they got the humpback inlays. Occasionally, though, you will see Duo Jets from those earlier years with humpback inlays. And what that usually means is that someone sent their Gretsch back to the Gretsch factory for either a refret or a neck reset. And often what Gretsch would do is they would just change out the entire neck, which is bananas. But that's what they would do sometimes. So if you see a guitar, early one with humpback inlays, it's probably not the original neck. This was the first Gretsch with a truss rod accessible from the headstock. And it also would have came from the factory with a stop bar and a tailpiece. Not on here now. I'll talk more about that in a bit. All right, let's talk knobs. This is a pretty classic Gretsch setup here. You have a volume for your neck pickup, a volume for your bridge pickup, master tone, master volume. What I think a lot of people don't realize with Gretsch's is that this tone pot is a stacked pot. So there's two pots in there. So actually when this is all the way up on 10, you're actually adding high end. That's what's giving these Gretsch's, one of the things that's giving these Gretsch's a really sparkly, chimey, bell-like sound. So with it all the way up, you're adding high end, sounds like this. Now, if you want to hear what the guitar really sounds like with these pickups and these electronics, you could just back that off to about 8 or 7, and that's going to be more like 0. So at 7 or 8, all the way up. All right, let's talk notable Firebird players, specifically Firebird players, not duojet players. First one up is Neil Finn. Neil Finn is one of my favorite musicians of all time. I love his guitar playing. I love his voice. I love his songwriting, his records. Known as the main singer-songwriter in Crowded House, also was in a band with his brother before that called Split Enz, and then teamed up with his brother later on for the Finn Brothers records. Him and Mike Campbell came into Fleetwood Mac recently and replaced Lindsey Buckingham, which was a great lineup. I don't know if you saw those shows, but they sounded fantastic. And he's back out with Crowded House again. So he has 2 main guitars that he uses when he plays with Crowded House. One is his 73 Gold Top Deluxe. The other one is a 1958 Gretsch Firebird. And in 58, this would have come with the humbucking Filtertron pickups and thumbnail markers over the top. Another notable Firebird player is Bo Diddley. Bo Diddley had a 1957 Firebird, Gretsch Firebird, that he used on a lot of those early records. It's featured on the cover of a lot of those early records, like Go Bo Diddley. Let's talk about another Firebird player that is a little unexpected here, and that's George Harrison. So the story goes that during the Cavern Club days, George's duojet went down, and he had to borrow another guitar. And the guitar that he borrowed, and I don't know for how long, was a 1958 Firebird, just like Neil Finn's. So it had the Filtertrons, it had the thumbnail markers. I don't know much about that story or how long he played that guitar for, and if he played that on any recordings. I have no idea. Maybe some of you guys know, and you could put that in the comments and help us out. We would love to know more about that. Okay, so here's how the guitar came to me. The top was spray painted this really bad red. Not anything like the original color. It was bright, almost orangish. The sides and back were spray painted black, and there was specks of black spray paint all along the binding. The pickup spacers were totally shot. The pickup covers were totally worn out and gray. The hardware was all changed. The only thing that was original was the tuners. It had no pick guard. It had a bad fret job. And worst of all, it needed a neck reset, which often Gretsches do. Old Gretsches usually need a neck reset, and that's kind of a nightmare. Every luthier does not want to do a neck reset on a Gretsch. It's a total pain in the ass. All right, so let's talk about the positives. Positives were, despite all that, I could tell this was a good guitar, and I could tell that it was going to be a great guitar if I put a bunch of work into it. I could also see that all the electronics were original. The pickups were original, caps are original, the pots are original, and the wiring is original, which is also a big plus. So I reached out to Gretsch whisperer Kurt Wilson, and Kurt Wilson is an expert when it comes to Gretsch guitars. Kurt restored Mary Osborne's White Falcon. That's the first White Falcon. It was the prototype White Falcon. It's a very famous guitar. Did the neck reset on that. He's worked on Setzer's guitars, Billy Zoom's Gretches. He's worked on Fountains of Wayne's Gretches. I don't know anyone else that knows more about restoring and working on Gretches than Kurt Wilson. I'll put a link to his website along with a link to a photo collection of this guitar, starting where it started with the spray paint and everything being stripped and being brought back to life. I'll put those links down below. Now, the lore is that Gretsch employees would go out to lunch and maybe have a couple drinks, maybe a few drinks, maybe many drinks, and then go back and make more guitars. And this gave rise to the question, did you get a pre or a post-lunch Gretsch? And we know that vintage Gretsch guitars could be incredibly inconsistent. And when you're doing a neck reset on one of these things, you kind of don't know what you're going to get. When Kurt took the neck off of this one, there was 2 screws into the heel, and there was also a 1/2-inch dowel. I've heard stories of people finding a wadded up matchbox instead of the dowel in there. I've heard multiple screws in all different directions. I've heard lots of crazy stories about this, but Unfortunately, what this means is it's really hard to do a neck reset on a lot of Gretsches without completely destroying the neck pocket, which is unfortunate. And this is what makes people not want to work on these guitars and do neck resets. It's kind of a pain in the ass. So when you do that, you have to rebuild a brand new neck pocket. And Kurt did this by using a 200-year-old piece of Douglas fir, really strong, really hard wood, and had to rebuild that neck pocket from scratch to reattach the neck to the body of this guitar. So because of the spray paint, there's still a little bit of a question mark. Is this actually a Firebird? Now it does have the sticker back here by the pots. It says 6131, looks totally legit, but it's always nice to have a little bit more proof. And when Kurt started sanding this thing down, he saw red underneath the black, and that's a very good sign, because the way that Gretsch used to finish these guitars is they would spray the back, sides, and top all red. They would finish them all red first, and then they would tape off the top, and they would finish the back, sides, and neck black. So having red underneath the black was just another sign, more proof that yes, this is actually a Firebird. Kurt also had to remove all the frets, resurface the fretboard, refret it, clean up the binding, polish up the top of these pickup covers. We got new old stock tortoiseshell spacers from Joe Carducci over at Gretsch, which was a huge help. Very, very grateful he sent us those. Put on a new stop tailpiece, or put on a new stop bar and a bigsby. These are new. These are things that I wanted on here. And refinished it with the right color, nitrocellulose lacquer. But then that left the pickguard, and this didn't have a pickguard at first. And one of the most surprising things I learned from Kurt when we were looking for a pickguard or dealing with the pickguard is that the pickups on vintage duo jets are not always in the same place. So the pickguards are all a little different. You know, there's no one template for a vintage duo jet. So what we had to do was trace where the pickups were, where the screw holes were, and we had Mike over at QUICKGUARDS make us a great repro for this guitar. That was a crazy thing I had no idea about. Finally, I had Matt over at 30th Street Guitar set it up for me, and here's the fully restored 1956 Gretsch Firebird. So you're probably asking, was it worth it? Look at all this work you've done to it. Why not just get a new Gretsch? It absolutely was worth it, because nothing really compares with these older pickups, these older electronics, this old wiring, this old wood, the decades and decades and decades of players playing this instrument. This is all stuff that I just can't replicate now with a newer instrument. It's completely worth it. And I recognize at this point that I don't really own any of my instruments, especially the vintage ones. You know, I'm just a caretaker of these instruments. We all are. They're gonna go to somebody else at some point. So I like the fact that I was able to give this instrument a second life by putting it in the hands of somebody like Kurt Wilson and getting it fully restored. At some point, I'm not gonna be around and it's gonna go into the hands of another musician, and I know they're gonna appreciate that I put all this work into it and I made it a beautiful playable instrument again. Okay, if you're digging videos like this and you're digging this channel, want to show some support, the best way to do that is to hit the subscribe button. It's a little thing on your end, but it helps me out a ton in growing this channel. The other thing that you could do is you could go check out my teaching website. I'm always putting out new courses, masterclasses, lessons, and jam tracks. I'll put the link to that down below. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you in another video.